Picture this. Two friends who promise to always protect each other are having a war. They are both part of the same team, a group of nations called NATO. They were supposed to be on the same side, always. But they were fighting on the cold, gray ocean. They weren't using tanks or planes. One of them was using giant scissors, and they were fighting over a fish, a simple codfish. This really happened. For the people of Iceland, codfish was not just food. It was like their only treasure chest. All the country's money came from selling this one fish to other places. It was everything to them. The country is a volcanic island. It is very beautiful, but not much grows there. The ground is hard rock and ice. You can't plant big fields of corn or wheat. So the sea was their farm. It was their garden. It was the only place they could get enough food and money to live. Without the cod, their country would have nothing. So, what did Iceland do? They took a map of the ocean and drew a big circle around their island. A much bigger circle than before. They told the world that all the fish inside this new circle belonged only to them. It was like a kid in a sandbox drawing a line and saying everything on their side was theirs. It was a very bold move. A tiny country was making a huge new rule for the whole world. The United Kingdom, a much bigger country with huge fishing boats, did not agree. Their leaders said the ocean belongs to everyone. So their big boats called trawlers kept fishing inside Iceland's new circle. This was a big problem. Iceland's tiny Coast Guard ships sailed out to meet the giant British boats. At first, they just sailed near each other. A small boat next to a huge one. A silent warning in the middle of the sea. This is where the giant scissors come in. Iceland invented a special tool. It was a secret weapon called the net cutter. It was a big metal claw they would drag behind their little ships deep under the water. These brave net cutters were a huge problem. But they were just the start. The fight was about to get much, much bigger, and a lot more dangerous. The United Kingdom's answer was to send their huge gray Navy warships to protect their fishing boats. Now it was a real standoff. Giant military ships faced off against Iceland's tiny Coast Guard cutters in the cold, rough seas. This is when things got really crazy. The tiny Icelandic Coast Guard ships started playing a dangerous game of bumper cars on the ocean. They would speed up and slam right into the side of the giant British warships. It was an act of pure defiance. But wait a minute, how could this possibly work? Iceland had no army, no navy, just a few small Coast Guard boats. They were a tiny island nation. The United Kingdom had one of the most powerful navies in the world. It was like a little mouse roaring at a giant lion. So why didn't the lion just crush the mouse? The secret wasn't in the water, it was in the sky. This was happening during the Cold War, a time when two big teams, the USA and the Soviet Union, were in a global standoff. Iceland was on the USA's team, called NATO. And Iceland had something that made it one of the most important places in the world: its location. It sat right in the middle of a huge ocean path between the Soviet Union and America. The United States had a giant base in Iceland. It was like a watchtower. From this base, they could see any Soviet planes or submarines trying to sneak across the ocean. It was the eyes and ears for the entire team. So, Iceland played its secret superpower. They sent a message. It was quiet, but it was powerful. They told NATO and the USA, if you don't make the United Kingdom leave our fish alone, we will quit the team. And we will kick you out of our watchtower. This was a huge shock. The United States couldn't believe it. Losing that watchtower would be like going blind in a fight. The American leaders were stunned. They couldn't afford to lose that base. Not now, not with the world divided in two. Suddenly, a tiny country's argument over fish became a huge problem for the most powerful nation on Earth. This was Iceland's true weapon. It wasn't a ship or a gun. It was a map that showed their small island sitting right in the middle of a global power struggle. They knew their own value, and they were ready to use it. And just like that, the Cod Wars ended. Iceland won. But for thousands of fishermen in towns across the United Kingdom, it was a disaster. Their jobs disappeared almost overnight. These were people whose fathers, and their fathers before them, had sailed the same cold waters. Whole communities that had fished for hundreds of years were broken. The big fishing boats were tied up in the harbors, never to sail again. It was a quiet, sad end to a way of life. A victory for one nation was a deep loss for the families of another. But the story doesn't end there. Because of this little fish fight, the whole world changed its rules. Other countries saw what Iceland did. They saw how a nation could draw a huge circle around its shores and call it their own. Soon, nations everywhere wanted their own big circle of ocean. This led to a new global agreement, a new law for the sea. This law gave every coastal country a huge patch of ocean that only they could control, the exclusive economic zone. Because of the Cod Wars, the map of the world's oceans was completely redrawn. It was one of the biggest, quietest changes in modern history. It decided who owned the riches under the waves, not just fish, but oil, gas, and everything else. All because one country refused to back down over cod. Isn't that amazing? A tiny island nation with no army stood up to a global power and won. They didn't do it with weapons. They did it by understanding their own unique importance in the world at that exact moment in time. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with force. They are won with smarts, courage, and knowing your own worth. A small key can unlock a very big door. This small fight had a huge echo. Other countries were watching. They saw what Iceland did. Many of them thought about their own coasts and their own treasures in the sea. They realized they could also draw a line to protect their own food and resources. This idea grew and grew. It led to a massive change for the whole world. Nations came together and created a new rule for the oceans. It is called the Exclusive Economic Zone. This rule gives every coastal country control over the sea for 200 miles from its shore. It was a brand new map for the world's waters. And it all started because of a fight over fish. A tiny nation's bold move redrew the lines on nearly 3/4 of our planet. The world's oceans were carved up, not with ships and cannons, but with an idea. An idea that a country's home doesn't stop at the beach. Think about the fish you might eat for dinner. The journey of that food is tied to this story. The rules that decide who can fish where and how much they can take were born in this strange conflict. The Cod Wars are on your plate in a way. You just can't see them. Today, these ocean zones are incredibly important. They are not just about fishing. They decide who gets to drill for oil under the sea. They control who can build giant wind farms to make clean energy. This invisible border, stretching 200 miles out, is one of the most powerful lines on Earth. It makes you wonder, what other small struggles are happening right now? What quiet fights could be changing the map of our future? History is not always loud. Sometimes the biggest changes start with a whisper, or a tiny boat cutting a fishing net. The story shows us that power isn't just about the size of your army. Power can be about knowing what is most important to you and protecting it with everything you have. Iceland knew its fish were its life. That simple truth was its greatest weapon. This is the real lesson of the Cod Wars. It's not just about fish. It's about how a small group, a small nation, can stand up for itself. They used their smarts, their courage, and their one big bargaining chip to win against a giant. It's a turning point that proves the small can be mighty. This story is a powerful reminder. It shows that the world we live in was built by moments like these. Moments of daring, moments of cleverness, moments when someone decided the old rules were not fair anymore, and they were brave enough to make new ones. So the next time you look at a world map, remember the invisible lines, the ones in the ocean. They tell a crazy and interesting story. A story of how a few stubborn people in a cold place, fighting for their fish, changed the world for everyone. And it all unfolded right under the surface.